What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? And today I'm going to be talking about more about Bioshock 2 as a whole when it comes to its visual fidelity and more of its artistic structure to a certain standpoint of this game, because I felt I didn't really touch more about that on my previous Bioshock 2 video. What I want to do here is that I want to talk about more on the lines of why I think Bioshock 2 is a better successor to that of Bioshock 1. But other than that, I do believe that Bioshock 1 still has a really good intimate place of when it comes to immersive sim role playing aesthetic first person shooters to date. Now, with Bioshock 2, I really thoroughly enjoyed this game as much as I did, because when I played this game for the first time back in the PS3 days, I didn't really think much of this game at first. And the reason behind that is because I normally don't always like sequels when it comes to gaming or when it comes to movies or any type of medium. But I think as far as BioShock is concerned, I really thoroughly enjoyed more so with BioShock 1 and BioShock 2. The reason being is because Infinite to me felt like, even though that there was some BioShock 1 and 2 references, more so of BioShock 1 references than BioShock 2, because there was a lot of things involved between BioShock 1 and BioShock 2 within Infinite, but it was a very interesting and somewhat convoluted type of confusing type of way to me. But however, when I thought about Bioshock 2 more so, it was not just because of its whole entire meaning of Rapture. When it came to Rapture and Bioshock 2, I always felt like that it was, even though it did feel some samey or to some familiar of certain type of degree from that of the first one, but however, there are certain types of areas within the world of Rapture and Bioshock 2 that really made it set apart and somewhat different to that of the first one. And I'm going to discuss this right here on my channel. And if you want to get more Bioshock content on my channel, you can be able to hit that subscribe and that like, and vice versa. So here we go. Now, one of the beautiful things what I loved about Bioshock 2 per se is that you get to play as a Big Daddy. But he was a Sigma type of alpha or prototype of sorts of a Big Daddy. And I think that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with Bioshock 2 more so than I did with Bioshock 1, because of that specific reason. It was the concept of getting behind that big helmet of his, or that big helmet of a Big Daddy. And I think that's where this game really falls under line when it comes to the concept of the Big Daddy. Being that fatherly figure, sort of say, as I was previously said in my previous Bioshock 2 video. And that's where I'm getting a lot of vibes with Bioshock 2 more so, because you play as the Big Daddy. But it's more on the lines of what the Big Daddy does. He's not just a hulking beast. He is a fatherly figure to Eleanor Lamb, which is one of the little sisters in this game. And there's a big bond there. And that's where I was saying is that that's what I love about BioShock 2 more so than I did with the first one, because the first one really didn't have that type of concept to it, even close to the very end of the game, because Jack in the first BioShock, he did actually end up becoming a Big Daddy, but however, he was not like a pure Big Daddy as you play as in Bioshock 2, and that's what I love about Bioshock 2. You're playing as a Big Daddy. You're playing this beast of sorts, but however, you're still getting this concept of the world of the Big Daddy and how Rapture really influences the Big Daddy of becoming that fatherly figure to the little sisters more so. And that's where I feel like that's where the Big Daddy is concerned when it comes to BioShock 2, because there's a lot of things involved around the world of this game, and that's where I feel like that's where BioShock 2 just does a lot of things that I wasn't really quite expecting at first, because I'm like, I just felt like it was another BioShock game, which it is, but it's the crux of this game is what makes this game somewhat different, because you're playing a Big Daddy. And that's where I feel like that even though you play as a Big Daddy, but you still are able to pertain and equip different types of plasmids. I mean, but the plasmids I'm sure are probably gonna be similar to that of the first one. Like the Electrobolt. You can throw electric or Electrobolt on a pool of water and electrify hordes of splicers, and that's what you can normally do in the first one. But what I want to get to here is that I feel like when it comes to Bioshock 2, this game, it does a really good job with its immersive sim adventure of it. And what I mean by that, it's the world building. The world building, I believe, in Bioshock 2 felt more organic than the first one did. But with the first one, it was not just because it was organic, but it was a little more cathartic. It was a little bit more dark to its atmosphere. But I felt like in Bioshock 2, it felt, like I said, it did feel the same, but it also felt different to a certain type of degree as well, because you're playing something that we normally didn't really quite play in the first one, but we did in a certain way, but it just didn't feel right. It was not organic enough, and that's where I felt like that it was a forced thing, if you think about it. But in Bioshock 2, it's not forced, because you're playing that Big Daddy, and you're utilizing different types of degrees of using the gameplay concepts of that, using the drill or a rivet gun or a machine gun or vice versa, dude. You have all these different types of weapons and the concepts of them in this game and how you're able to utilize that. And what's another really cool thing about Bioshock 2 though as well is that I really love the fact that you can be able to set trap rivets. The trap rivets are able to pertain of, utilizing them to go have the splicers go into them and kill themselves rather than you killing themselves altogether with your rivet gun or your drill or any other weapons at your disposal. But that's what I love about this game though too, is because there's a lot more involved, I feel like, because in the first Bioshock, when you had combat scenarios, you are able to only shoot with one hand and use plasmids with the other, left and right, correct? And so I felt like that was a little bit of a less construct in terms of that gameplay aesthetic. But when it comes to Bioshock 2 with that type of construct or that theme, when you're playing as the Big Daddy, you are utilizing your left hand and your right hand at your disposal. You are able to utilize any kind of weapon in your right hand and utilize the plasmids in your left. And that's what I believe that's what makes Bioshock 2 greater than the first one, because you are utilizing these weapons, either if it's the plasmids or the weapons themselves. You are utilizing these at your pure disposal of what you're going to do, how you're going to achieve it, and I think that's where Bioshock 2 really does better and stands apart from Bioshock 1, and I love that. Now, I want to talk more of the world of Bioshock 2, as I previously mentioned before, so I intend to repeat myself, so my apologies on this. But what I really want to talk about, the world building in this game, it's excellent. Do I think it's a little bit better than the first one? Yeah, to a certain degree. But however, the world in Bioshock 2, in Rapture, obviously, you have different types of splicers as well. You have... I'm trying to remember what kind of splicers they were, but they were like bulkier splicers, and they are able to run bash you and everything. And you basically have to be on your toes with those types of splicers and being able to understand their movements. I believe when it comes to Bioshock 2, this one is a little bit more tactile to a certain degree rather than the first one, because the first one, it did feel like a little bit of a run and gun in a certain aspect way or concept. But however, in Bioshock 2, you have to be a little bit more smarter, because you are playing, like I said, you are playing as a Big Daddy. And you're utilizing a little bit more of playing as the Big Daddy, and how you are able to just like go to different types of lengths of how to use that combat efficiency. And I think that's what makes Bioshock 2 even more greater. Now, the world building, I was kind of venturing off topic there, so I'm sorry. Now, the world building I believe in Bioshock 2 is it's very interesting, and it's a little bit more robustful in a way, and a little bit more vibrant because even though that this game does feel samey to that or similar to that other first one, it still maintains a proper balance of knowing what you want to do and what you're playing as, because it's a big daddy, like I previously mentioned. And so you're getting these different types of concepts, and knowing that the big daddy is influenced in this world of Rapture with the little sisters. And I love the way how this whole entire world of Rapture is, it's a place that's falling apart, excuse me. And so that's where I loved about Bioshock 1, because there was a lot of involvement in Bioshock 1, though, too, as well. But in Bioshock 2, there's more involvement going on, because you're still going up against splicers, you're still going up against these other mechanical ways of getting around certain types of areas. You still have the security bots, you still have to go up against other different types of travesties. You still have to go up against the other types of big daddies as well in order to get a little sister and being able to adopt her. And that's where I feel like that's where Bioshock 2 does a really good job of that world building, because the big daddy and the little sister is always something that really makes this whole world of Rapture to really integrate itself. It's a world, like I said, it is falling apart, but it's where as playing as a big daddy and adopting a little sister is what makes this whole entire city of Rapture, giving it a proper balance, if that's the proper way of saying it. So my apologies on that little slight pause there. So that's what I truly feel about this game in general, and I think that's where Bioshock 1 was very heavily influenced in terms of its world building and how you're able to utilize different types of concepts of, weapons that you are able to use and how to use those types of weapons to go up against the splicers. And it's no different in Bioshock 2. And I think in Bioshock 2, it just does it better because you're able to dual wield with your left hand and your right hand. In your right hand, you have your weapons. In your left hand, you have your plasmids. So you are able to utilize these different types of things that you can do and be a little bit more, not just efficient, but you can be a little bit more on the lines of being more efficient with those types of weapons, and I love that. That's what I love about Bioshock 2 more than Bioshock 1. Even though I still loved Bioshock 1 to a certain degree, but I think that Bioshock 2 just does a better job with better utilizations of the plasmids and the weapons, even though you are playing as Big Daddy. But that's where I felt like that with Bioshock 2, it's a similar but familiar, but still has some new ideas to old ideas combined, if that makes sense. And I do actually believe that, because I believe Bioshock 2, if I remember correctly, I think it sold more than the first one. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. But however, I just think that when it comes to Bioshock 2, it just does something that I never really was quite expecting. Okay, so another thing though too, what I love about Bioshock 2 more so, it's not about what this whole entire game is about. It's the fact that it has everything to do what this game initially does as a game as it is. And that's where I feel like from Bioshock 1 to Bioshock 2, they are both unique Bioshock games. Even though that you are playing as a Big Daddy in 2, you played as Jack in the first one, which was a human protagonist. But there are two different separate. I believe that both Bioshock 1 and 2 are two separate entities, in my own personal opinion, and I do believe that they are, because even though that these games do intertwine with themselves, from the storyline from 1 to 2. And initially, in Bioshock Infinite, the story is somehow implemented from 2 to Infinite as well. That's why these games are very well implemented in their own type of structure of concept of storytelling. That's where these games really fall under as a good way of not just as an immersive sim game as these games are. Especially like the first two, in my personal opinion, I felt like that when it came to Bioshock Infinite, it was more action oriented and not as it was interesting, but it wasn't as mysterious and dark like the first two Bioshocks, like 1 and 2. And that's where I felt like with Bioshock 1 and 2, especially Bioshock 2, since we are doing a video on this, is that, it has to do with everything of what this whole entire world of Rapture means as a whole. And that's where I was saying it's like, that's why I love the first two Bioshocks more so than I do with Infinite, because yes, you are playing 2 different protagonists in Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2, but it has to do with why these games are far more better, in my personal opinion, because it's the world building. The world of Rapture really tells a unique and vibrant, dark and cathartic type of story to it. And that's where I felt like with Bioshock 1, it was different. It was a very different type of FPS. These games are not just an immersive sim type of game. They are an immersive sim game that gives you alternative and different types of options. That's what I loved about Prey 2017. And, with the new System Shock remake that already came out for PC, I'm eventually waiting for that to come to console, because I really want to talk about the game more so when that game comes out as well. But I digress. It's just the fact that I love Bioshock 2 with what this game really pertainly does to its uniqueness of how growing that story even more from the first one. And that's where I'm saying I believe Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2 do an outstanding job with its world building, its character progression, whether if you're playing as Jack in Bioshock 1 or playing as a Big Daddy in 2. But these, like I said, these games really do intertwine or intermingle with each other when it comes to certain types of story. And that's where I feel like that where Bioshock 2 is concerned, it's not just because it's a very different type of FPS, much like from the first one did. It's just that it's giving you more of a story from what the first one did. Because, like I said, it has to do with what Bioshock 1 did when you play as Jack. You're always going to get different types of stories from a sequel from an original game, like Bioshock. I think Bioshock 2 really stands apart from that, and it does a really good job on that, though, too, because of that specific type of reason, and that's why I love these games a lot. And what I really want to get to here as well is the fact that, that's where I feel like that when it comes to Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2, they do an amazing job of its architectural design. That's where I kind of faltered here a little bit in this video, is because I had a little bit of trouble of what I was trying to say, but now I'm trying to say it here, is that this game is not just because of its world building, as I said, but it's artistic design. I love the artistic design of these games, particularly 1 and 2, because the artistic designs in these 2 games of the Bioshock series really tells a unique type of story, because it's not just about Rapture. It's the artistic design of it. It's the structure of each type of part of a specific type of level from Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2. And that's what I love about these games. These games always tells a unique type of story to these different types of areas of the game. And, much like, going up against the Big Daddy in Bioshock 1. Or going up or playing as a Big Daddy in Bioshock 2, but going up against other big types of going up against different types of Big Daddies in 2. And that's what I love about 2, though. Even though that Bioshock 1 did have certain type of degree of different types of Big Daddies, but in Bioshock 2, they kind of revitalized that in a certain way, or kind of revamped that from what the Big Daddies actually look like in 2 than from what they actually initially looked like in 1. Because there are some similarities and comparisons there, but in my own personal opinion, that's what I'm saying. That's what I love about Bioshock 1 and 2. Because even though that these games do fall under the same category of an immersive RPG type of game, first-person shooter, but even still, that these games really do a good job of a unique type of character progression through audio tape files. And that's where this game actually really does an amazing job, though, too. You know, they actually did that in Prey 2017, and they did that in System Shock 2, if I remember correctly, because that game was a long time ago, and I'm really trying to do my best here to remember that. But however, that's what I love about these types of games. I believe when it comes to Bioshock 2 or Bioshock 1 or Prey 2017, these games just do a really good and amazing job of telling a unique type of story. And that's why I was saying when it comes to its architectural design and the concept of it, Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2 do an amazing job with that. I love the way how these different types of levels like Fort Frolic or Arcadia in Bioshock 1, or, you know, Fontaine's Fisheries in 1 as well, or, you know, the Adonis Waters or whatever it's called, or the Adonis Plaza in Bioshock 2, you know, showing these different types of structures and utilizing of how these structures are going to tell a unique story. And I love that. That's what I love about games. Another game that actually kind of reminds me of that a little bit, but it was not an immersive sim. It was an action-adventure more oriented. It was called Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning. And that game came out, I believe, in 2020, a couple of years ago. But like I said, that was not an immersive sim. It was more action-oriented. But however, wherever you went, it's always going to tell you a unique story where, you know, different types of area or like a cave or something like that, or like a, well, you know, like a certain type of area, like a fae or something like that. They always told a unique, different type of story. And that's where I felt like where Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2 really did, like I said, did an amazing job on that storytelling. And I find that fascinating. And that's why I make these types of videos, is because I love talking I love to talk about the conceptualization of a game more so, rather than just like its gameplay. But I do like the gameplay in 2. And like I said, I don't want to go back into that because, like I said, I intend to repeat myself. So I'm not going to do that. I'm literally trying to limit myself to not do that a lot or as much. So, but that's where I'm getting to. But, you know, we're getting close to the end of this video. So what I really want to do here, though, too, is that I want to focus on something more so than I was anticipating trying to put in. Is that, you know, with the gunplay in 2 is just, it's far more. It does play similar to that of the first one, like I said, but it's not. It's a lot better. That's all I gotta say about that. But however, I think when it comes to Bioshock 2, it just does something better than 1 does, because it really sets the bar of what a sequel should be, and I think Bioshock 2 really did an amazing job on that front, in my personal opinion. So I'm hoping when Bioshock, I understand that they are making a new Bioshock, but it's going to be helmed by a different company, but we don't know when that's coming out, of course. That could be in the next, maybe possibly 2 to 3 years, but even so, I'm hoping where that game's going to go. But all I can say is that I love going back to replaying these games and getting that nostalgia factor. And so I want to dive one more time. Is that I love everything about Bioshock 2, what it does, and how it utilizes playing as a Big Daddy, and it just does it perfectly. But anyways, too much further ado, this is Citizen JV. Thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciated. Any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. Be more than happy to reply back if and whenever possible. And you guys have a good rest of your weekend. Peace.